The young man walked into the dealership with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had saved every penny from his part-time jobs during college and his first job after graduation. For him, this wasn't just about buying a car, it was about proving something to himself. Growing up in a small apartment with his mom, who worked tirelessly to provide for them, he learned early on that life wasn't easy. But he also learned the value of hard work, patience, and dreaming big. His mother often told him stories about how proud she was of him. She would say, "You're going places, kid, just keep believing." And believe he did. Now standing outside the shiny glass doors of one of the most expensive car dealerships in town, he felt like he was finally stepping closer to the future he had always imagined. Inside, the showroom sparkled under bright lights. Rows of cars gleamed as if they were fresh out of a magazine shoot. The smell of leather and polish filled the air. Everything looked so perfect that it almost felt unreal. People moved around confidently, some chatting with salespeople, others admiring the vehicles. It was a world far removed from what he was used to, but he didn't let that intimidate him. After all, he had done his homework. He knew exactly which model he wanted, how much he could afford, and what kind of financing options were available. He approached the front desk, trying to look as composed as possible. A young woman greeted him with a polite smile. "Hello, how can I assist you today?" she asked. Her voice was warm, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes, as though she was wondering why someone dressed casually, in jeans and a hoodie, was here. "I'm looking for a specific car," he replied, pulling out some papers from his backpack. These weren't just random notes. They were carefully printed documents showing his loan pre-approval, monthly budget calculations, and even a list of features he wanted in his new vehicle. He laid them on the counter, hoping to show that he meant business. The woman nodded and called over one of the salesmen. That's when things started to change. The salesman, a tall man in his 40s with slicked back hair and an expensive watch, walked over with a forced grin. "Hey there, can I help you find something?" he said, glancing at the papers on the counter. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The young man explained what he was looking for: the make, the model, the trim level, all while keeping his tone calm and respectful. But then, something shifted. As the salesman looked him up and down, taking in his casual clothes and the worn-out sneakers, his demeanor changed. His smile became tighter, less genuine. "Well," the salesman said, crossing his arms, "we do have some models that might interest you, but I'm not sure any of them will fit your, price range." The way he said "price range" made it sound like an insult rather than a question. The young man froze for a second. Did this guy really think he couldn't afford anything here? Sure, he didn't look like the typical customer in this place, but he had come prepared. Ignoring the slight sting of embarrassment, he pushed forward. "Actually, I've already checked the pricing online and I know my numbers. I'm good to go." But the salesman wasn't convinced. Instead of showing him the car he wanted, he led him to a corner of the showroom where older, less impressive models sat gathering dust. "These are more affordable," the salesman said dismissively, gesturing toward the lineup. "They're practical, dependable, and won't break the bank." It was clear now. The salesman thought he was wasting his time. Every word dripped with condescension. Every glance carried judgment. Other staff members nearby snickered quietly, clearly amused by the situation. The young man clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. Was this really happening? Was he being treated like this because of how he looked? Despite the humiliation, he tried to stay calm. "Look," he said firmly, "I came here to buy a car, not to be judged. If you're not interested in helping me, maybe someone else is." But the damage was done. The salesman shrugged indifferently, muttering something about dreaming too big before walking away to talk to another customer. Standing alone in the corner, the young man felt a wave of frustration wash over him. He had worked so hard to get here, yet none of that mattered to these people. All they saw was his appearance, not his ambition or determination. For a brief moment, he considered leaving right then and there. But deep down, he knew he couldn't let them win. This wasn't just about buying a car anymore. It was about proving to himself that he deserved to be taken seriously. As he left the dealership, his mind raced with thoughts. Who were these people to decide what he could or couldn't achieve? They didn't know his story, his struggles, or how many sacrifices he and his mom had made along the way. What they saw was surface level, and that burned him more than anything else. Little did he know, however, that this humiliating experience would lead him down a path he never expected, one that would uncover secrets about his past and challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. The young man stormed out of the dealership, his fists clenched and his mind racing. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The dismissive looks, the snide remarks, the way they treated him like he didn't belong. It replayed in his head over and over again. It wasn't just about the car anymore, it was about being judged before he even opened his mouth. For the first time in a long while, he felt small, powerless, like all the effort he'd put into building a better life for himself didn't matter. He walked aimlessly for a while, trying to shake off the anger and embarrassment. His phone buzzed, in his pocket. It was his best friend calling. They had been through everything together: school projects, late-night study sessions, even tough conversations about growing up without fathers. This was someone who truly understood him, so he decided to pick up. "Hey, man," his friend said when he answered. "What's up? You sound mad." "I am," he replied, his voice tight with frustration. "You won't believe what just happened." And then he spilled everything: the trip to the dealership, the rude salesman, the humiliation, and how unfairly he'd been treated. His friend listened quietly, letting him vent. When he finished, his friend paused for a moment before saying, "Man, that's messed up. But you know what? Maybe this is a sign. Have you ever thought about finding your dad?" The question caught him off guard. His father, the man who had left when he was just a toddler, the man whose absence had shaped so much of his life. He rarely talked about him, not because it didn't hurt, but because it felt pointless. What good would it do to dwell on someone who clearly didn't care? "What are you talking about?" he asked, confused. "Why would I look for him now?" "Think about it," his friend pressed. "If he's still around, maybe he could help, or at least explain why he left. You deserve answers, don't you?" For a moment, he didn't say anything. The idea of searching for his father had always seemed impossible, something reserved for movies or TV shows. But now, standing there on the sidewalk with his pride bruised and his dreams temporarily derailed, it didn't feel so far-fetched. Maybe his friend was right. Maybe it was time to confront the past instead of running from it. That night, he sat down at his laptop, hesitating for a moment before typing his father's name into the search bar. He barely remembered it, but his mom had mentioned it once or twice when he was younger. As the results loaded, he braced himself for disappointment. What if he found nothing? What if his father really was gone for good? But then, something caught his eye. An article popped up, a profile piece written a few years ago. The headline read, "Local business tycoon expands empire across global markets." Below it was a photo of a sharply dressed man shaking hands with another executive. At first glance, the man looked unfamiliar, but as he stared longer, he noticed subtle similarities. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the jawline. It was unmistakable. This was his father. His heart raced as he clicked on the article. According to the write-up, his father was the CEO of a major corporation that owned several luxury brands, including the very car dealership where he'd been humiliated earlier that day. The irony hit him like a punch to the gut. All this time, he'd been treated like he didn't belong, and yet the person running the entire operation was his own flesh and blood. Shocked, he immediately called his mom. She picked up after a few rings, her voice warm as always. "Hey, sweetheart, how's it going?" "Mom," he said, cutting straight to the point. "Why didn't you tell me Dad was the CEO of a huge company?" There was silence on the other end. Then softly she sighed. "I was hoping you'd never have to know." Her tone made him pause. "What does that mean? Why wouldn't you tell me?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. When he left us, he made it clear he didn't want anything to do with us. He was chasing success, building his career, and we weren't part of his plan. I didn't want you growing up thinking you needed him or that you were somehow less because he wasn't around. So, I kept quiet. Her explanation stung, but it also made sense. Still, knowing the truth changed everything. He hung up feeling a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and even a flicker of hope. Could this be the key to turning things around? Or would reaching out only lead to more pain? The next morning, he returned to the dealership, not to shop, but to get answers. Walking inside, he felt a mix of nerves and determination. This time, though, he wasn't going to let anyone push him aside. He marched straight to the manager's office and introduced himself. "I'm here to see my father," he said firmly. "Tell him I'm waiting." At first, no one believed him. The receptionist laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. But when he pulled out proof, a copy of his birth certificate and a screenshot of the article featuring his father, the room fell silent. Word spread quickly, and soon enough his father appeared. Standing face to face with him was surreal. The man looked older than in the photos, with streaks of gray in his hair and lines etched into his face. Yet there was no mistaking the resemblance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, his father broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have been there. I made mistakes, big ones. Can we start over?" It wasn't the apology he'd imagined, but it was a beginning. Over the next hour they talked, awkwardly at first, then more openly. His father admitted he'd been selfish, too focused on climbing the corporate ladder to think about the family he'd left behind. He offered to make amends, even suggesting financial support, but the young man refused. "I'm not here for your money," he said, his voice steady. "I came because I wanted to understand why you abandoned us, and now I see exactly what kind of man you are. A man who values appearances over relationships." His father flinched at the words, clearly affected. Meanwhile, news of what had happened reached the rest of the dealership staff, including the salesman who had mocked him. Security footage revealed the man's behavior, and within hours he was fired. As he left the dealership for the second time, he felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Finding his father hadn't solved everything. In fact, it raised even more questions, but it gave him clarity. He realized that his worth wasn't defined by anyone else's opinion, whether it was a rude salesman or an absent parent. From now on, he vowed to take control of his own story, no matter where it led. After that intense meeting with his father, the young man found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, he felt a strange sense of relief, finally knowing the truth about his dad and why he had walked out all those years ago. But on the other hand, it was hard to ignore the bitterness that lingered. His father's apology sounded sincere, but words couldn't erase decades of absence. Still, there was something undeniable. For the first time, his dad seemed genuinely interested in being part of his life. Over the next few weeks, they started meeting regularly. At first, these encounters were awkward, filled with long pauses and forced small talk. They didn't know how to act around each other. It was like two strangers trying to piece together a puzzle without seeing the full picture. His father would ask questions about his childhood, his education, and his dreams while he listened cautiously, unsure if he could trust this sudden change of heart. He didn't want to let his guard down too quickly, not after everything. One day, during one of their meetings, his father brought up an idea. "Listen," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "I want to make things right between us. I've been thinking, maybe you'd be interested in interning at my company. It's a chance to learn the ropes, see how things work from the inside." He hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no outright. He didn't need his father's charity or connections to succeed, but another part of him saw it as an opportunity, not just to prove himself, but to understand the world his father had built. Maybe, just maybe, he could use this platform to create real change. So after some thought, he agreed. But on one condition. "I'm not doing this because we're related," he told his father firmly. "If I join your company, it has to be on merit. No special treatment, no shortcuts, got it? His father nodded, looking both surprised and impressed. Fair enough, he said. You'll earn your place, same as anyone else. Meanwhile, the humiliation he'd faced at the dealership continued to weigh heavily on him. It wasn't just about what happened to him personally. It was about the bigger issue behind it. Why should people be judged based on how they look or dress? Why should someone have to prove their worth just to be treated with basic respect? These questions burned inside him, fueling a growing desire to speak out. Late one night, unable to sleep, he picked up his phone and opened social media. Scrolling through posts, he noticed countless stories of others who had faced similar discrimination, whether it was at high-end stores, restaurants, or even workplaces. Each story reminded him of his own experience, and it hit him. He wasn't alone. There were so many people out there who felt unseen, undervalued, and dismissed simply because they didn't fit into society's narrow definition of success. Inspired, he decided to share his own story. Sitting cross-legged on his bed, he recorded a video. In it, he spoke candidly about what had happened at the dealership, the condescending remarks, the laughter from the staff, the way he'd been brushed aside. But he didn't stop there. He talked about finding out who his father was and how it made him realize just how deep-rooted these biases can be. This isn't just about me, he said, looking directly into the camera. It's about every person who's ever been treated like they don't belong. We deserve better than this. Respect shouldn't come with a price tag. He posted the video late that night, not expecting much. After all, social media was crowded with voices vying for attention, but within hours the response was overwhelming. People flooded the comments section with messages of support, sharing their own experiences of being judged unfairly. Others praised him for speaking up, calling him brave and inspiring. Before he knew it, his post had gone viral, sparking conversations across platforms. Encouraged by the reaction, he kept going. He started using hashtags like respect every customer and don't judge a buyer by their hoodie, turning his personal story into a movement. News outlets picked up on the campaign, interviewing him and highlighting the systemic issues of prejudice in luxury industries. Companies began taking notice too, including his father's corporation. The CEO, the very man who had once walked out on him, issued a public statement acknowledging the problem and pledging to implement stricter policies against discriminatory behavior. Greg, the salesman who had mocked him, became a cautionary tale. His firing was widely reported, serving as a reminder of the consequences of treating customers poorly. Other employees at the dealership admitted they had witnessed such behavior before but stayed silent, afraid of rocking the boat. Now, emboldened by the backlash, they came forward to demand better training and accountability. Through it all, the young man remained focused, not on revenge, but on making a difference. He knew that true change wouldn't happen overnight, but every step mattered. And as the weeks turned into months, he noticed subtle shifts. More people were speaking out, refusing to accept mistreatment as the norm. Luxury brands started reevaluating their customer service practices, ensuring that everyone, regardless of appearance, was treated with dignity. Back at home, his mother watched his journey unfold with a mix of pride and worry. One evening, over dinner, she asked him, "Are you sure you're ready for all this attention? It's a lot to handle." He smiled, setting down his fork. "Yeah, Mom, I am. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about standing up for what's right. If telling my story helps even one person feel less invisible, then it's worth it." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You've always been strong, but now you're using that strength to lift others up. That's something special." Her words stayed with him, grounding him whenever doubt crept in. Yes, the road ahead was uncertain, and yes, rebuilding trust with his father would take time. But he was determined to keep moving forward, to turn pain into purpose and setbacks into stepping stones. Little did he know, however, that his journey was far from over. There were still lessons to learn, bridges to mend, and battles to fight. But for now, he was content knowing that he had taken the first step toward creating a better future, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small. As the weeks went by, the young man found himself navigating two very different worlds. On one side, there was his newfound relationship with his father, a fragile but hopeful connection that required patience and effort. On the other side, there was the growing movement he had sparked online, which continued to gain momentum and attention. Balancing these two aspects of his life wasn't easy, but it gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. His internship at his father's company began soon after their agreement. At first, stepping into the corporate office felt surreal. The building itself was massive, with glass walls that reflected the sky and sleek furniture that screamed wealth. Employees moved around briskly, glued to their phones or typing furiously on laptops. He couldn't help but feel out of place again, just like he had at the dealership. But this time he reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about fitting in. It was about learning how things worked so he could make them better. On his first day, he was introduced to the team he'd be working with. Most of them were older, seasoned professionals who probably didn't expect much from him. But instead of shrinking under their gaze, he stood tall, introducing himself confidently. "I'm here to learn," he told them, "and maybe teach you guys a thing or two along the way." They laughed politely, though some exchanged skeptical looks. Still, he didn't let it bother him. Over the next few weeks, he threw himself into the work, soaking up every bit of knowledge he could. His father checked in occasionally, offering guidance without overstepping boundaries. Their conversations were still awkward at times, but they were slowly finding common ground. Through shared projects and late-night brainstorming sessions, they began to understand each other better. One evening, after wrapping up a particularly challenging presentation, his father pulled him aside. "You're doing great," he said, his tone softer than usual. "I know I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of you." For a moment, the young man didn't know what to say. Hearing those words from his father, the man who had once walked away, meant more than he cared to admit. "Thanks," he replied finally, looking down at his shoes. "That means a lot." While his professional life was evolving, his advocacy campaign outside of work was taking off in ways he never imagined. What started as a single video had grown into something much bigger. People from all walks of life reached out to share their own stories of being judged unfairly. Some were heartbreaking, others infuriating, but all of them reinforced the need for change. He realized that his voice had become a platform, not just for himself, but for countless others who felt unheard. He decided to take things further. With the support of his growing online community, he launched a petition calling for stricter accountability measures in luxury industries. Retailers, car dealerships, and high-end service providers needed to adopt zero-tolerance policies against discrimination, he argued. Within days, thousands signed the petition and major news outlets picked up the story. Journalists interviewed him, asking about his motivations and goals. "It's simple," he explained during one interview. "Respect shouldn't depend on how much money you have in your bank account or what you're wearing when you walk through the door. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly, no matter where they come from." The response was overwhelming. Companies that had ignored complaints in the past suddenly scrambled to address them. Several CEOs released statements promising reforms, while trade organizations announced plans to host workshops on bias training. Even his father's company implemented new guidelines, ensuring that employees understood the importance of treating customers with dignity. But not everyone was happy about the changes. Some critics accused him of stirring up trouble, claiming that his campaign was an attack on businesses. Others dismissed him as someone riding the wave of social media fame. Despite the negativity, he refused to back down. Every harsh comment only fueled his determination to keep pushing forward. Amidst all the chaos, he made sure to stay grounded. His mom remained his rock, always reminding him to focus on what truly mattered. "Don't let the noise get to you," she would say whenever he seemed overwhelmed. "You're doing good work. That's all that counts." She also encouraged him to take breaks and enjoy moments of peace. One weekend, she surprised him with tickets to a local art exhibit. As they wandered through the gallery, admiring paintings and sculptures, he felt a rare sense of calm. For a few hours, he wasn't the guy leading a movement or the son reconnecting with his estranged father. He was just himself. Later that evening, sitting on the couch with her, he opened up about how much everything meant to him. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing," he admitted. "What if I mess up? Or what if people stop listening?" She smiled gently, patting his hand. "You're human," she said. "You're allowed to make mistakes. And as long as you stay true to yourself, people will keep listening because they see your heart in this." Her words stayed with him, anchoring him whenever doubt crept in. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he also knew he wasn't alone. Between his mom's unwavering support, his father's tentative efforts to rebuild trust, and the millions of voices cheering him on online, he felt a strength he hadn't known he possessed. By the end of the year, the impact of his campaign was undeniable. Luxury brands across the country had adopted new policies aimed at eliminating discriminatory practices. Employees underwent mandatory training sessions, and customer feedback systems were revamped to ensure accountability. Meanwhile, his internship had turned into a full-time role, allowing him to continue advocating from within the industry. Yet, despite all the progress, he knew there was still much to be done. Prejudice wasn't something that could be erased overnight. It was deeply ingrained in society, requiring constant vigilance and action. But for now, he was content knowing that he had planted seeds of change, seeds that would grow stronger with time, thanks to the collective efforts of everyone involved. As he looked back on everything that had happened, from the humiliating encounter at the dealership to the viral campaign and the unexpected reunion with his father, he realized something important. Life rarely followed a straight path. There would always be twists and turns, challenges and triumphs. But the key was to keep moving forward one step at a time, refusing to let anyone define your worth. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly unstoppable. A year had passed since the young man's life took a dramatic turn. What started as a humiliating experience at a car dealership had blossomed into something much bigger, a movement for respect, fairness, and accountability. Along the way, he'd uncovered family secrets, reconnected with his long-lost father, and found his voice in a world that often tried to silence him. Now, standing backstage at a charity gala hosted by his father's company, he felt a mix of nerves and pride. Tonight was different. It wasn't just about sharing his story anymore. It was about showing people what could be achieved when pain turned into purpose. The event hall buzzed with energy. Hundreds of guests filled the room, dressed in their finest suits and gowns. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting soft light over tables adorned with elegant centerpieces. The air smelled faintly of champagne and polished wood. On stage, a string quartet played soothing melodies while attendees mingled, discussing everything from business deals to philanthropy. To anyone else, this might have seemed like just another glamorous evening, but for him, it was proof of how far he'd come. As he waited for his cue to step onto the stage, memories flooded back. He thought about the day he walked into the dealership, feeling hopeful yet vulnerable. He remembered the sting of being dismissed, the frustration of being judged without a second glance. Those feelings had driven him to speak out, to use his experience as a catalyst for change. And now, here he was, invited not as someone's son or an intern, but as a speaker whose words mattered. Finally, the MC announced his name. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next guest, a remarkable individual whose courage and determination have inspired millions around the world." Applause erupted as he stepped into the spotlight. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. Some were familiar: his mother, sitting proudly in the front row, his father watching intently from the side, but most were strangers. Yet they all shared one thing: a willingness to listen. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "When I first decided to share my story, I didn't know where it would lead. All I knew was that I wanted to shine a light on something many of us have experienced, the feeling of being invisible, of being judged before we even open our mouths. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Then he continued. For me, it happened at a car dealership. I walked in excited, ready to take a big step toward achieving a dream. Instead, I left humiliated, treated like I didn't belong simply because of how I looked. At the time, I didn't realize that moment would define so much of what came after. He went on to describe the viral video he posted, the overwhelming response it received, and the conversations it sparked. He talked about the emails he'd received from people who said his story gave them the courage to stand up against discrimination in their own lives. He spoke about the companies that had pledged to do better, implementing policies to ensure everyone, regardless of appearance or background, was treated with dignity. But tonight, he said, his tone shifting slightly, I want to talk about something else, something deeper, because none of this would have been possible without forgiveness. The room grew quieter, almost reverent. He glanced toward his father, who sat motionless, listening intently. Finding out who my dad was, and learning why he left wasn't easy. For years I carried anger inside me, wondering why he hadn't been there. But meeting him again made me realize something important. Holding on to resentment doesn't fix anything. It only holds you back. He explained how their relationship had evolved over the past year. They weren't perfect. They still had moments of tension and misunderstanding, but they were working on it. Together, they had established a scholarship fund aimed at helping underprivileged youth pursue careers in technology and entrepreneurship. It was their way of giving back, of turning past mistakes into opportunities for growth. I'm not saying forgiveness is easy, he added, his voice softening. It's hard, really hard, but it's also freeing. When you let go of bitterness, you make space for hope. You give yourself permission to move forward, to build bridges instead of walls. The audience was silent now, hanging on every word. He could see nods of agreement, eyes glistening with emotion. Even the skeptics seemed moved, leaning forward in their seats. To conclude, he returned to the theme of resilience. Life throws challenges at us, some small, some huge. How we respond defines who we are. Will we let setbacks break us, or will we rise above them? Will we stay silent in the face of injustice, or will we speak up? He smiled, looking directly at the crowd. I chose to rise, I chose to speak, and I invite each of you to do the same. Whether it's in your workplace, your community, or your home, stand up for what's right. Be kind, be brave, and never forget that your voice matters. As he finished, the room erupted into applause. People stood cheering loudly, some wiping away tears. His mother clapped enthusiastically, her face glowing with pride. His father joined in too, nodding approvingly. For the first time, the young man felt a profound sense of unity, not just with his family, but with everyone present. After stepping off stage, he was swarmed by well-wishers. Strangers thanked him for his courage, executives praised his vision, and friends congratulated him on a speech well delivered. Amidst the chaos, his father approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. You did good tonight, he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Really good. For once, the young man didn't hesitate. He reached out, pulling his father into a hug. In that moment, there were no lingering doubts, no unresolved tensions. Just two people, finally finding their way back to each other. Later that night, as he drove home in the car he'd eventually purchased, not the luxury model he'd dreamed of initially, but a reliable sedan that suited him perfectly, he reflected on everything that had happened. From the humiliation at the dealership to the viral campaign, from reconnecting with his father to speaking at a high-profile event, it had been a journey full of ups and downs. Yet through it all, he had learned invaluable lessons about identity, forgiveness, and the power of perseverance. And as he parked in front of his apartment building, glancing at the lit windows signaling warmth and belonging, he realized something. He wasn't the same person who had walked into that dealership a year ago. He was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to keep making a difference. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them head-on, because now he knew exactly who he was, and nothing could take that away from him. The next morning, the young man woke up to a flood of notifications on his phone. His speech from the gala had gone viral overnight. Clips of it were shared across social media platforms, news outlets covered highlights, and people everywhere were talking about his message of resilience and forgiveness. Some called him an inspiration. Others praised his ability to turn personal pain into something meaningful for so many. But amidst all the praise and attention, he reminded himself of what truly mattered, staying true to who he was. As he scrolled through the comments and messages, one stood out. It was from a teenager who wrote, "I've always felt like I didn't belong because of where I come from. Your story makes me believe that I can still achieve my dreams if I keep going." Reading those words filled him with a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect, inspiring others to push past their own obstacles and find strength in vulnerability. He decided to respond personally to as many messages as he could. For hours, he typed replies, sharing encouragement and gratitude. Each interaction reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but to remind people that they weren't alone, that no matter how tough life got, there was always a way forward. Later that day, he met up with his mother for lunch. She greeted him with a warm hug, her eyes shining with pride. "Did you see all the love pouring in?" she asked, beaming. "You're changing lives, sweetheart." He chuckled, shaking his head. "It's crazy, Mom. I never thought sharing my story would lead to this, but honestly, none of it would have happened without you. You taught me how to fight for what I believe in." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "I may have taught you a few things, but you've grown into someone I admire more than anything. Keep doing what you're doing, okay?" Her words stayed with him throughout the afternoon. They grounded him, reminding him that while the world celebrated his achievements, the people closest to him saw beyond the headlines. To his mom, he wasn't a viral sensation or a public figure. He was simply her child, the same person she'd raised to value kindness and hard work. At work, things were shifting too. His advocacy efforts had sparked conversations within the company about diversity and inclusion. Employees began organizing discussions about unconscious bias, and leadership teams reviewed policies to ensure fairness at every level. The young man played a key role in these initiatives, using his platform to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. One day, during a team meeting, he shared a story about a customer who had been turned away from a dealership under similar circumstances to his own. "This isn't just about numbers or profits," he told the group. "It's about treating people with respect. Every single person who walks through our doors deserves to feel valued, regardless of their background or appearance." His colleagues listened intently, nodding in agreement. Slowly but surely, attitudes were changing. People were becoming more mindful of their actions, recognizing the impact even small gestures could have. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and resistance, but progress was being made, and that gave him hope. Meanwhile, his relationship with his father continued to evolve. They spent more time together, not just discussing business, but also sharing stories from their lives. His father opened up about the pressures he faced when he was younger, explaining how fear of failure had driven many of his decisions, including leaving his family. Hearing these details didn't erase the pain of the past, but it helped the young man understand his father's perspective. Together, they worked on projects aimed at giving back to the community. The scholarship fund they created gained traction, supporting dozens of students pursuing careers in technology and entrepreneurship. These kids came from neighborhoods like the one he grew up in, places where opportunities were scarce but dreams burned bright. Seeing their excitement and determination reignited his own passion for making a difference. One evening, over dinner, his father raised a question. "What's next for you?" he asked. "You've accomplished so much already. Do you ever think about what comes after all this?" The young man paused, considering the question. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet," he admitted. But I know one thing. I want to keep building bridges, whether it's through my career, my advocacy, or just the way I live my life. I want to leave the world better than I found it." His father nodded, a look of quiet admiration in his eyes. "That's a good goal," he said. "And whatever path you choose, I'll be here to support you." For the first time, he believed those words wholeheartedly. Their relationship wasn't perfect, and it likely never would be, but it was real, and that was enough. Months turned into years, and the young man's influence only grew. He became a sought-after speaker, traveling to conferences and events to share his story. He wrote articles, gave interviews, and collaborated with organizations dedicated to promoting equality and justice. Through it all, he remained humble, always acknowledging the countless individuals who had supported him along the way. Yet despite his success, he never lost sight of his roots. He stayed connected to his community, volunteering at local schools and mentoring young people eager to follow in his footsteps. He often reminded them, success isn't about money or titles. It's about knowing who you are and standing firm in your values no matter what life throws at you. One sunny afternoon, he returned to the car dealership where it all began. This time he wasn't there to buy a car. He was invited as a guest speaker for an employee training session. Walking through the showroom, he couldn't help but smile. The staff greeted him warmly, their demeanor a stark contrast to the hostility he'd encountered years ago. During his talk, he recounted his experience, the humiliation, the lessons learned, and the journey that followed. "Change starts with us," he told the audience. "Every interaction we have is an opportunity to make someone feel seen, respected, and valued. Don't underestimate the power of kindness. It can change lives." When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Many employees approached him afterward, thanking him for his honesty and insight. One woman, a new salesperson, pulled him aside. "Your story really hit home for me," she said. "I promise I'll do better moving forward." Her sincerity touched him deeply. It was proof that his efforts were making a difference, one person at a time. As he drove away from the dealership later that day, he reflected on how far he'd come. From the boy who once dreamed of owning a luxury car to the man now driving a modest sedan, he realized that material possessions meant little compared to the impact he'd made. He had turned pain into purpose, judgment into understanding, and absence into connection. And though challenges would undoubtedly arise in the future, he faced them with confidence. He knew who he was, a fighter, a dreamer, and above all, someone determined to create a better world. With the sun setting ahead of him, casting golden light across the road, he pressed gently on the gas pedal, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Because now more than ever, he understood that the most important journeys are the ones that take us closer to our true selves.